For John chapter 17, we're looking at verses 11 through 23. The first question is, multiple times in the passage, Jesus refers to keeping or protecting, depending on your translation, his disciples. The question is, what is he asking the Father to keep or protect them from? I'll just highlight the places where he refers to this concept. The first is in verse 11. He says, I will remain in the world no longer, but they are still in the world, and I am coming to you. Holy Father, protect them by the power of your name. Then in verse 12, he talks about what he has done. While I was with them, I protected them and kept them safe by the name you gave me. And then jumping down to verse 15, he says, my prayer is not that you take them out of the world, but that you protect them from the evil one. And there, actually, this one is where we find partially the answer. He says he's asking not that he take them from the world, but that he protect them from the evil one. So one of the things he's asking them to be protected from is the evil one. I do want to make a note that depending on your translation, it may be different. Other translations in verse 15 say, ask him to protect them or keep them from the evil. So that's a little different, but it's effectively the same thing because evil is caused by the evil one. So it's whether evil or the evil one, it's effectively asking that they be kept from evil or the evil one. The other part of this question, though, can be a little more specific because it's talking about what is he asking them to be protected from. In verse 12, he says, I protected them and kept them safe by that name you gave me. And then he gives us context. None has been lost, so none has been not kept. All have been kept except the one doomed to destruction, so that the scriptures would be fulfilled. So here we can have a little more insight into what he's talking about them being kept from. He says, I kept them and didn't lose any of them except Judas. And so we can look at what Judas was not kept from to understand what Jesus is asking God to keep them from. One of the things Judas was not kept from was the power of the evil one, the power of Satan. The Bible says just a few chapters back in John chapter 13, and reading here in verse 27, as soon as Judas took the bread, Satan entered into him. So Satan himself entered into Judas, and it seems that's one thing, at least, that Judas was not kept from. Satan did not enter into the other disciples, and so that can be seen as one of the things. And also it's in harmony with what we just saw in chapter 17. Judas was not kept from the evil one. So this is, again, the idea of what they're being kept from is the power of, or is the presence of the evil one. Number two, what does he say is the purpose of protecting or keeping them? Now this one, again, you could probably draw a few different points from it. I'll just make one note. In verse 11, he says, I will remain in the world no longer, but they are still in the world. I am coming to you. Holy Father, protect them by the power of your name, the name you gave me, so that, and so I think that's the emphasis there, keep them through the power of your name so that they may be one as we are one. So the purpose of this keeping is so that they may be one. So if they're kept from the power of Satan, that will bring them to unity. And the last question, how is he asking the Father to accomplish this protection or this keeping? And for this one, I'll read a few verses here. Again, the overall theme of this section here is that he's requesting the Father to protect or keep his followers from the power of Satan. Verse 14, he says, I have given them your word, and the world has hated them, for they are not of the world any more than I am of the world. My prayer is not that you take them out of the world, but that you protect them from the evil one. So here he says that I'm not asking you to take them out of the world. That would effectively protect them from evil, because if you take them out of the world where evil exists, then of course they won't be bothered by the evil. But he's saying, I'm not praying for that, but I am praying that you would protect them from the evil one while they are still in the world, even though they are not of the world. So how is it then that they are to be protected from the power of the evil one, while still being in the world? Verse 16, they are not of the world, even as I am not of the world. Verse 17, sanctify them by the truth. Your word is truth. Again, verse 14, he stated, I have given them your word, and the world has hated them. Now in verse 17, he's saying, sanctify them by the truth. Your word is truth. And so I believe that this is effectively the means by which he's asking the Father to keep them from evil, keep them from the evil one. By the word that he had given to them, he's asking the Father to preserve that word and even give more of that word which is truth. It makes sense, I believe, because the power of Satan is his ability to lie. It says, the Bible says that he deceived Eve. That was his power that he exercised over Eve. Jesus in John chapter 8 says that in verse 44, you belong to your father the devil, and you want to carry out your father's desires. He was a murderer from the beginning, not holding to the truth, for there is no truth in him, no truth in the devil. When he lies, he speaks his native language, for he is a liar and the father of lies. This is the thing that Satan has authored, falsehood, lies. This is Satan's power to deceive. Revelation describes him as the old serpent called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. This is the power of Satan, is the power to deceive. He deceived Judas, which is why he was able to enter into him eventually. He deceived him into thinking different things about Jesus than he should, different things about himself. And I believe this is what Jesus is asking the Father to do for his followers, to keep them from the power of evil, is to preserve the truth that they had received from Jesus and to give them more truth as we go into the last days. And we know in Revelation also, it states that as Satan has less and less time, he gets more and more angry. And so we can expect then that his lies will be more and more vicious, more and more cunning, more and more deceitful. And so again, it is necessary that the Father answer Jesus' prayer to protect his followers from the power of Satan, protect them from his lies by truth. I want to mention a few things about this that I believe are very important. First, if his followers are to be kept from the power of Satan by truth, it's necessary for the followers themselves to have a high regard for truth. In Thessalonians, Paul says that those who receive the love of the truth are those who will be saved, those who have the love of the truth. So if the followers of Jesus who are to be kept from the power of Satan are to receive this love for the truth, what then should be our attitude toward the lies of Satan? Logically, I should say, we should shun them. We should run from them. We should flee from them. Because if possible, he would deceive the very elect if he were able. The attitude of Jesus' followers should be, Lord, give us truth, and the whole truth and nothing but the truth. And let us flee anything that smells of the deceitfulness of Satan. I'm going to go into a point that I think is very important. Today, again, as Satan has little time, he's more and more cunning, more and more pervasive in his attempts to deceive the whole world. And I think one way in which he does it is by flooding our minds, flooding our eyes, flooding our brains with media that has so many subtle and overt falsehoods in them. Lies about who we are, lies about who others are, lies about God, just lies, lies, lies. And if we are not careful, the so-called elect may not be elect and we will be deceived. If we are not careful to protect our minds from these lies of Satan. The easiest example, of course, all of us have discussed this or heard this before, of how desensitized we become the more we see something. The generation of my parents, the generation of my grandparents, they grew up maybe seeing in their entire life maybe a few murders. And maybe I should say my grandparents more than my parents. Maybe seeing a few murders because they weren't watching television screens where constantly people are just easily being killed. That does something to you. There's no way that we can see that and not in our mind have a diminished value on of the importance of life, the diminished view of the value of a human life. These are lies of Satan that he is subtly and even overtly placing before us to take charge of our mind, to take charge of who we are. And again, I believe this is where the power of God to keep us from him depends on our avoiding, shunning these things, these lies of Satan. There are many other lies that I could go into, but I just want to read this one verse that's very, very poignant, I think, on this topic. And this is Colossians chapter 3, and just beginning I'll just begin with verse 1. This is Paul writing. He says, "Since then you have been raised with Christ, set your hearts on things above, where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. Set your minds on things above, not on earthly things." I think this matches very well with what we're talking about with Jesus. He says, I'm not praying that you take them out of the world and effectively bring them to heavenly places, but that you keep them from evil in the world. However, if in the world there is all this evil, all these lies that are crowding out our mind and trying to distract our minds, our only hope of salvation is that our minds be set on things above and not on the things of this earth. Not on the things of this earth. And so finally, brethren, as Paul says, the first thing he says, finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true. Whatsoever things are true. I can't emphasize enough how much I believe this is the way that God is trying to save us from the power of Satan in this generation. So by the grace of God, may you have that focus and be kept by his power.